We're live now. So, hi everyone. Today, as usually, it's Wednesday, 5 p.m. here in Dubai, 2 p.m. in London. And today we are having our special guest, Mollie. Thank you for joining us today. And with help of Mollie, we will be talking today about early years and skills development. Thank you for joining us.
And Mollie, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself before we get into what we're discussing today?
Yes, no worries. I've worked in FS1 now, which is in the early years, for almost 4 years now here in Dubai. And I must say that early years is definitely my most favourite year group in school. I love how creative you can be as a teacher. I love the way that we have the early years curriculum and the different 7 areas of learning, how we make our planning. And this year I was very fortunate to also come on board with the Little PM and help build their early years management projects as well. So I've been really, really lucky there, yes.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mollie. So today, of course, our focus is on the early years. And in some ways, it might seem that this is exactly the right thing for Little PM. In other ways, it might seem that it's quite a challenge. Obviously, there is quite a lot of experiential learning naturally in the early years. However, whether we can apply our 10 core skills from Little PM into the early years is perhaps a little bit of a challenge, but today we're going to explore how we've managed to achieve that. We believe that, because the focus of what we're doing at Little PM is to build life skills, the earlier we can build those, the better. And it's really just a case of adapting those in an appropriate way and making sure that they are accessible for the younger learners. So we're going to dive right into it today by looking at how we've actually managed to take our approach and bring it down to the early years. Now, normally our units in the Total Project Manager have the same core elements. We have the project charter with a clear project goal. We have our the tick list to manage the steps of the project. Our project plan will provide any supporting resources, and we'll have the time to reflect at the end in the retrospective. So we've still kept those four same sections. But Mollie, would you mind talking us through a little bit about how we've adapted this for the early years?
Yeah, so obviously in our projects, every project is aligned with the 7 areas of learning in early years, which as early years educators, we're used to doing this within our planning at school. But in our Little PM projects, the way we've adapted these is that you'll notice we've adapted the language, so we have the child-friendly language used. And also we've got some support resources as well, where very much a lot of the time we are linking it to those 7 areas of learning. We're linking it to phonics, for example. I do have some flashcards with me now. These are just little examples from one of our projects where we have little flashcards, and here we've got CVC words used on the flashcards, which many early years educators are obviously quite used to the fact that these are very important in the early years also.
Lovely. And I think that's really important, the fact that we are linking it to the 7 areas of learning. We've talked a lot in the past about how for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, we're linking to curriculum objectives, and we've talked about timetable pressures as well. And, I wonder whether there are maybe some misconceptions about primary teachers about strains on the timetable in early years, but there is something that's still very relevant, isn't it, Mollie? That, there's still a lot for you to cover, and it's important to make sure that we are connecting Little PM to what you need to achieve. And I think, so just like we would link Little PM to the curriculum objectives in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, that's why we're making that focus of connecting to the areas of learning at EYFS. So we're not taking away time from teachers who have lots to impart in the formative years for the children. And we will have a look a little later at some of the other resources. We've got some examples of early years units that have been designed and tried out by Mollie. But just some little things here on the screen that we can talk through. Obviously, there's a lot less language. Mollie's talked about the importance of including those CVC words in the flashcards. But the importance of the pictures there to help the children understand what they're doing. And rather than having one long tick list, we still have the project plan here. But at the end of each task, there's a tick at the bottom of the page. So
Yeah,
there's
and
less.
I particularly also love this project. It's a classroom jobs, right? How
So
boring can be assigning the classroom jobs to the children, but then how much different it can be when it's done in a gamified way.
absolutely, and I think there's a few things that you included, Molly, as like the badges and the lanyards for this and other projects to give them that sense of ownership on the learning. Have they? Is that something the children really responded well to?
Yes, I've noticed that. So I think especially in the early years, because the children aren't always used to it as well, as not all early years approaches follow this method where the child's given that sense of leadership. So you do find actually when those little learners are given that sense of leadership, they respond quite well to it. They get excited, they have so much fun. So I think that's why the Little PM projects are so amazing for students as young as FS1.
So do you think that's one of the main differences between Little PM and other EYFS pedagogical approaches? Is it the fact that we're involving the children at all stages and that they're being given some sort of guided autonomy rather than being told what to do? Do you think that is one of the standout differences?
Yeah, I think that's the main standout difference actually, because obviously we have the children as the project managers, whereas many other approaches usually have the adult leading it and the children are just there giving their ideas. And obviously this encourages independence, it encourages teamwork skills, leadership skills, which these are all linked to the Little PM and as well as the 7 areas of learning in EYFS too.
Lovely. And what have you found with the children being the leaders? I think maybe some people watching this, there might be a degree of cynicism thinking, how can the children actually show leadership at that age? But what's been your experience with that?
I think it opens your eyes actually, because even as an FS1 teacher for 4 years myself, I was quite amazed with the turnout of how the children have responded, how they've participated to the projects. And when we later show the video actually of our museum projects, I think everyone else, the audience, will be super impressed too, because it does open your eyes and it helps you understand that such little children, they can do so much if you give them the opportunity to.
Lovely. Yeah, and I found that myself when I was working with Year 4, in the sense that there were some children who put themselves forward to be the project manager for a group, and I was a little apprehensive as a teacher for them to take on that role, but they really surprised me. And I think there's definitely an element that if we give children the opportunities to do these activities, to take on these roles, then they can surprise us and they will get better at it. But it's not something that we naturally go towards as teachers, to give up that sort of sense of control and let the children try themselves.
Yeah. And it's also a good chance to give the leadership and the leading opportunity for different children's at different, while you will be doing different projects, right? So not only one child will have an opportunity to develop that skills, but different children can do that. I think it's amazing.
Absolutely. So we'll absolutely come back to some specific examples later, but just to pivot a little bit towards a bit of theory that will link in nicely to one of the first ones we're looking at. This is from a paper about constructionism in the early years, and I've talked before in our webinars and some of my articles about my sort of my love of constructionism, the fact that it's one step beyond constructivism. It's the focus on actually making tangible objects, particularly for younger learners. This is really really empowering. So I'll read out this quote. It's a little shorter than ones we normally have, but I think it's a really valid one. So it says, personally meaningful artifacts engages children both intellectually and emotionally. Their products reflect their developing understandings. Children's artifacts can be shared as a group and reflected upon individually in order to extend their understanding. This pedagogical model is most effective when the learning context is collaborative, interdisciplinary, and supports learning and exploration over an extended period of time. So there's a lot in there, I think, but I think the idea of having a physical, tangible outcome is really important. Do you think, Mollie, that is particularly relevant for the early years? If they have something tangible that they've created, it's going to help their learning.
Yeah, so I definitely think that when children are given that opportunity to make something that matters to them, it definitely helps them understand their learning even more. And I do think it also helps to increase engagement. It builds more of an excitement within the learning as well, which, as we know, is super important for the younger ones.
Absolutely. I think I've read things before about the fact that the development of a social emotional awareness can actually have a good positive impact on areas of learning like maths and English communication. Do you think that having that collaborative element is really essential in early years? Do they get more from it than if they were just working individually on these projects?
Yes, for sure. So as we know, that will help build the teamwork skills. And here in Dubai, we have a lot of EAL learners in our classrooms as well. So I think that collaborative approach is super important, especially in the classrooms with a lot of EAL learners, because you've got children that have all different native languages. So if they're then working as a team, they're picking up different language from one another. And I do think that helps support them within the learning of all different areas as well. Yes.
Yeah. And it's sort of it gives children from a variety of backgrounds something common to communicate about. Whereas, they when they're developing language and when they're developing that social awareness, it can be a little too open-ended sometimes if they're not sure how to talk to each other when they're playing. But if we're giving them a specific task, they've got something that draws them together. And if we're giving them those key bits of vocabulary, if we're giving them the flashcards in common, then it helps them to have a focus for their communication. Do you think is that something you found, that when the children are working collaboratively on a specific topic, then that's easier for them than if they were just having sort of open collaborative time, as it were?
Yeah, definitely. And I think being collaborative in general, especially in early years, is important, because you'll find that sometimes the children have different strengths and different weaknesses. So then they can all work together with the different strengths they've got to help one another as well. Yes.
Right. Well, let's have a look at one of the early years little PM units. And I think it just leads on beautifully from this quote. And we'll play a video immediately. It will play automatically, and then we'll be able to hear a bit more from Mollie about this unit.
Mommy and Daddy, please could I have a paper bag? We brought paper bags. I wrote my name, Amel. My name is Taran. This is me writing my name. Hello guys, we love to be a team. We looked at the examples. I love using pom-poms. We mixed the color. Then I painted a cloud. Well done, Janisha. That is butterfly. We use glitter. I like to sprinkle glitter. Wow! What do you think to our paper bag? We reuse our paper bags. In our museum, that has special things. We love working together. We love to recycle. Thank you, Miss Mollie. We have fun.
Oh, lovely.
So sweet.
It really is. And so this is our project about upcycling paper bags. So Mollie, do you want to tell us a little bit about this unit?
Yes, of course. Yeah, so this unit was fully focused on the children learning about how to recycle, the importance of how to save the planet, and we did it in a rather fun way as well. So the children were asked to bring in a paper bag from home, and then I told them that they can design it themselves so that we can essentially reuse this, and then we're not just throwing it in the trash and not using it at all. And I did find that obviously, because it's a very creative project as well, I found that the children had so much fun participating in this one in particular. I do find in early years they particularly love the creative side of things, and anything creative they're always drawn to, both the boys and the girls. And I think this was a nice project in particular because every child had a different paper bag, so they all designed it in different ways. And then we kind of worked as a team as well to add it to one of our previous projects, which was the museum we had made, and other Little PM project too.
Yeah, love it. And we'll have a look at that, the museum project in a little bit as well.
Yes,
and I think what was fantastic to hear in that video is, and I'm glad we've got the sound, because we can hear the children talking about the process. And I think for me, that's really important. And do you think that that helps their learning, that helps sort of internalize their learning and sort of practice that reflection? Do you think that's an important part of it?
Definitely. And I think because in early years as well, we are always using routines, for example, and following instructions is another thing that's quite important. So I think the fact that the children are reminded to reflect within the Little PM projects, I think this helps them in other ways as well in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a skill that it's obviously talked about a lot in education, you know, any sort of anything to do with metacognition, the reflection, and talking about the learning. There's all sorts of strategies, but I think it is really important to build it in, but also to do it in a way for early years, to have some specific practical examples on how to do it as well, because it's one of those things that I think lots of teachers could tell you that it's important to do, and we know why it's important, but actually finding a way to do that, particularly with the younger children, can be a bit tricky.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention there was when you've been helping us adapt the Little PM approach to the early years, you've made use of lots of examples to show the children first. Why is that something that you put more of a focus on compared to when we're doing the units for Key Stage 2, for example? Why is it more important to have those examples?
I think with the little ones, it's super important to always have that modelling and the examples. As an early years educator, I've always done the modelling before any learning activities. So I just thought this was a perfect addition to the Little PM projects, because I think that when a learner is so little, you sort of can't expect them to be able to do something if they've not been shown what they're essentially making beforehand. So I do think these examples are a great way to support all of the learners in the projects.
And but what's nice, I see that it didn't restrict them in terms of their creativity, because I think that is a concern sometimes. If you give them an example, then you're veering back towards telling them what to do, but that doesn't seem to have been the case here.
No, not at all. Yes, you do find as well in the early years, I think, because they're so creative and they're so imaginative, that the modelling or the examples, it's just sort of something that they can look at beforehand, and then they can extend from that as well. It's just a case of a little bit of support. And you might find that some learners may use it more than others. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it's another important part of how we're adapting this, because obviously with the project plan, we've got the pictures there, the captions are there as well to support what the steps are, but you know, having the examples while having the model, that's another way that we're allowing the children to take ownership. If we just kept it as we had done for even Key Stage 1, where there's a lot more text, they're going to be more dependent on the teacher, whereas if we're using the pictures and the examples, we're empowering them to have a go at the project themselves and not being reliant on the teacher to tell them what to do. So if they see what they need to do and they see the steps visually, then we're giving them the opportunity to do it themselves. And is there sort of a risk of letting them go off and do things? I know even with older children, sometimes when you set them off, you worry about whether they're going to be able to achieve the goal. Did you have anyone who was still sort of needing that guidance? What's the sort of the variety of levels in terms of children in FS1 who are able to work by themselves versus ones who will continue to need the support?
I would say now that we're approaching the end of the school year, most of mine are super independent. But if you were to ask me that question at the beginning of FS1, it may be that there's a little bit more teacher support there, or teacher assistant support as well. But I think it's just a case of prompts with the children as well. So I think the way we assess in EYFS, there's no right or wrong. The children can be as creative as they want, and they can have all the ideas that they'd like. And like I say, there's no right or wrong. So I think it's nice to give them prompts for sure. And you will find that certain learners may need a bit more of a push than others.
Yeah.
I wonder also about how do they collaborate on those projects that we're organizing for them.
Yeah, so in terms of collaborating, you'll find that friends may sit with one another, and they might actually mirror the different resources some of them are using. So within this project, I had a range of different art resources, and some of the children use little pom-poms to create little circles on the bags. And then I did notice quite a lot of them will take a look at how the friend's bag looks, and then they might copy a little idea to do on their own. So it still has that sense of collaboration there also.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because that's something that teachers often will think about, and it's something I have done as well when doing little PM units. Do you put the children with their friends, or do you split them up? Do you let them choose which groups they're working with? How did you handle that when you were doing the units?
When I was doing the units, I did it like a complete mix. So
Okay.
in some of the projects, they would choose their friends, and in some projects, we would decide the groups. And I think that's a nice approach to do as well, because then it ensures that the children are not just working with the same students every time, that they're given that opportunity to communicate and collaborate with different members of the class as well.
Absolutely. I think that's really important, and sort of brings us on to the next thing I want to talk about. We have talked a lot in our webinars about the World Economic Forum and the Education 4.0. And just a couple of weeks ago, they put out a new paper, which was about education readiness for the age of AI. And it is a fantastic article. I made a post about it briefly yesterday, I think, on LinkedIn. And I think it's worth all teachers reading this. And although this is mainly about AI, there is some really relevant parts that we can connect to anything that we're doing to do with Little PM, and even with early years. So this is one of the quotes that says, human-centric skills such as resilience, flexibility, empathy, and active listening are among the most sought-after capabilities. Now, this quote is actually in reference to what employers are looking for. So perhaps it seems a little strange to link this when we're talking about early years. However, I believe that if this is what we want children to be later in life, whether or not it's for purposes of employment or whether it's just for life in general, I think these are skills that we have to start building at a really young age. Do you think, Mollie, that these are things that we need to be building in EYFS?
Yes, I totally agree there. So I think early years is arguably the most important time to begin developing these human-centric skills, because essentially at this age as well, you'll find that children are forming the foundations for how they communicate, how they think, how they understand themselves, and how they understand each other. So I think if they're focusing on these from such a little age, I think it will definitely help them develop as people.
Yeah. And I'm curious particularly about the empathy, I guess, because my perception, and do correct me as a teacher of older students, is that the children tend to be a little more egocentric at that age. But do you think, that you said they were like looking at their friends and sort of copying that? Do you think that you see that empathy developing in FS1, or is it something that still sort of isn't quite emergent yet at that age?
I think when they first join FS1, I don't think it's emerged. No, I think a lot of the time, especially if children have came from homes where they may be the only child as well and they haven't got siblings, so they're not used to having to share at home, for example. So like you say, sometimes I don't think that they've necessarily got those skills built already. And that's why I think the Little PM projects are so wonderful for the early years, because I feel that they encourage the children to build those skills of empathy and how to collaborate with one another, how to communicate well with each other and work as a team.
Yeah, I think we also have a very good example of one of our projects that we have done for the early years related to the meals, right?
Yes,
I think that's exactly
Yeah.
a good example on how to develop the empathy as well.
Yes, definitely. I think that's a great project in particular because it's all about understanding one another's culture in the home. And I think that works amazing here in the UAE because, as you're aware, in most of our schools here, we have students from all around the world in one class. And it may be that you don't understand someone else's culture. So I think to teach that from such a little age, I think that's a wonderful thing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So the this unit we're talking about, we've not actually got on the slides, but it's called Sharing Meal Times, and essentially the children take it in turns to lead a role play scenario where they're sharing with the rest of the team what a standard mealtime looks like, or it could be a special meal. And I think then they're sharing their traditions, or maybe their customs, or what their daily life looks like. And I think that comes back to what I was just saying about children perhaps being a little egocentric at that age, and they maybe think that, oh, I go home and have tea like this, and that's how everyone in the class must do it. Were the children quite surprised when you did that unit, Mollie, that things were different in other people's homes?
Yes, definitely. And I feel like in that unit in particular, the children learned quite a lot about one another. And because of that, it kind of brought them a little bit closer as well, because then they were beginning to understand not only how their friend is in school, but how their friend may live their life at home as well.
Yeah. And this isn't especially relevant for FS1, but I am just curious, Mollie, since this paper I'm referring to on the screen is talking about education and AI. Have you ever seen any sort of awareness of AI in your FS1 children? Is it something that they've even mentioned or have heard their parents talking about? Is it creeping into FS1 already?
I wouldn't say the students are necessarily aware at all, but one thing I must say is that as a teacher, we do love to use AI in the early years for sure, because I feel like it's given us the opportunity as well to create some good resources as well with our learning. Yes.
Yeah. We had a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about teachers using AI in Key Stage 1. Could you give us a couple of examples of how it sort of has helped you and sort of changed your practice a bit?
I would say it's allowed me to be even more creative. For example, now with AI, you can use story characters. We were actually reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar recently, and the children loved it so much so that when we were doing different activities, I was actually incorporating this in pictures through AI, which is something I wouldn't have been able to do before.
I must say, anyone watching, if you have a chance, do go and check out what Mollie's put on LinkedIn to with The Very Hungry Caterpillar and the Gruffalo as well, because it is fantastic.
Bad word.
So bringing it back to these something you referred to earlier, actually the children referred to it in the video of the upcycling the paper bags. They were connecting it to a previous Little PM unit, which was their Museum of Special Things, and I guess this links a bit as well to do with the children sharing things that are special to them and their traditions. So let's have a look here. We do have a picture of how it turned out, but Mollie, would you mind telling us a little bit about this one as well?
Yeah, so this is our project Museum of Our Special Things. And within this project, my students learned what a museum is and how they can create their own museum. Now, for the first part of the project, I gave them the option as to whether they wanted to bring in a special object from home or if they wanted to create something special to bring in from home. And as you can see shown in the picture, all of the children opted for creating something themselves and bringing it into school. So it just shows how the early year students always sway towards the most creative option. They love to be creative. And then we designed the museum together. The students worked together to create the museum, to add their special things to the museum. and we added this into our corridor. And I must say, I think because they have the ownership over this area of the corridor, they seem to have a deeper emotional connection to this area than the other areas of the corridor. And I do think it's because they were given that opportunity to lead the outcome, whereas the other areas are what we formed as teachers. And I just find that this area in particular is the most special to them, for sure.
Yeah, I think
That's an interesting outcome.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, you know, having that connection, having that ownership, is going to make such an impact. And
Definitely, yes.
and again, this one, I just actually this links into what we can see on the screen, which is one of our Little PM core skills, which is communication. Now, as we've talked about before, pretty much every Little PM unit will have a variety of skills that we are building, but particularly for early years, we're trying to focus on one thing, just to allow the students to explore that a bit more deeply and not worry about all these different skills. Now, I think there's multiple ones that you could choose if you were doing the Museum of Special Things. I've picked out communication here. What was that element like, Mollie, when the children had contributed something to the museum? How were they then communicating why they'd chosen it, why they'd made it?
Yeah, so I think that definitely started a lot of communication amongst the children, because they brought it into school in the morning upon arrival. So a lot of them were already chatting before we even began the project. They were already chatting about how amazing the object was that they made. Some of them were amazed by some of the paintings their friends had done, and that definitely sparked a lot of communication. I think then when we took it out into the corridor, they were chatting amongst one another, using those teamwork skills and collaborating to understand how they wanted it to look and to help one another as well. Yes.
So it wasn't just necessarily about them creating the object and talking about it. They were involved in sort of the curation of it as well, were they?
Yes, so the planning stages as well, yes.
Yeah. Okay. There are quite a variety of units we've got for early years now as well. And as well as linking it to the areas of learning, obviously we in Dubai, the moral, social, cultural curriculum that we were talking about last week, that doesn't come down to the early years. But you mentioned, Mollie, it's particularly important with the sharing meal times for the children to get to know a bit about each other's sort of customs and traditions. Do you think that units like this help with that?
Yes, for sure. I think they definitely do. I think they help support that. And I think as teachers, sometimes you struggle with ideas of how the children can learn about one another, especially understanding the world. I think that area of learning in early years in particular, sometimes that can be quite hard to plan. So I think that because Little PM have created these projects that are aligned with those different areas, I think it's wonderful for teachers as well. Yes.
Well, that does bring on to the next thing, and I think there's some slight irony is perhaps not the right word, but a bit of shock almost. Sorry that I've failed to change the title there, but this was about progress in measuring progress in early years. So I was looking at this document earlier. This is from the Department of Education in England, and it's from a much the document's talking about the specific percentages for development, but it's not so much that's interesting. It's part of their rationale for how they measure good level of development. So broken down on this table here, we've got the primary areas of learning and the specific areas of learning, and together they are making up those 7 areas of the early years that Mollie's been referring to. And we can see understanding the world and expressive arts and design down at the bottom there. And what really stuck out to me, and something I didn't know, was that if you see on the right column, they say no, which means that they are not taken into consideration when measuring a good level of development, which to me seems very strange, that although we consider these the 7 key areas of learning for early years, they have a different weighting when it comes to measuring development. And you've heard Mollie talk a lot today about creativity and understanding the world, and yet those two things are not taken into account at all. So a child might be, well, it could be both ways. A child might be excellent with their communication, their literacy, and their maths, but they might be struggling with their creativity and understanding the world, and they were measured as developing really well. But conversely, we might have a child that's really creative, has really got a good understanding of different cultures, different traditions, but because they're perhaps struggling with their literacy or their physical development, they're measured as not making good progress, not at a good level of development. So Mollie, obviously you are far more experienced with early years than me or Anara. What do you think about this?
I think I agree with you, Edward. So I was rather confused actually reviewing this document. Because me personally, I would say that understanding the world and expressive arts and design are fundamentally two of the most important areas of learning for early years, because I think those two areas as well can help support different areas for the children as well. For example, with expressive arts and design, it helps develop the children and their creativity, how they express themselves, for example. When we come to understanding the world, that's quite linked to cultural awareness. And I think that's very important, especially here in the UAE as well. As like I've mentioned before, we have a lot of learners in the classroom from all different places. And I think to build relationships with one another, to build positive relationships, help with friendships, and help with communication skills with one another, I think it's really important that they're all culturally aware of how their lives are at home, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's exactly my thoughts. And there is a much longer document by the OECD about the connection between social emotional learning and language development and the potential for maths and literacy in the future. And it does emphasize the interconnectedness of all these skills. I think if you are wanting to build relationships, then by understanding different people, different cultures, you are going to really help yourself in building relationships if you've got a better understanding. And similarly, if one of the things we're looking for in maths, in the early years particularly, if you have that imagination, then you're going to be able to spot those patterns better. Same with the communication and understanding as well. I think that's really linked into the imagination and expression. I find it hard to understand the rationale behind the separation of these skills, to be honest. But what we can do on a positive note is that, if we are promoting activities such as we're trying to do with Little PM that focus on those understanding the world categories, we are supporting teachers to find easy ways to teach these areas that might otherwise be neglected.
Yeah.
I think that possibly the benefit is that if not all teachers are aware of the different weighting of these, then they're not necessarily going to actively neglect these bits. But I think the worry for me would be if there are teachers out there who know that two of these 7 areas are not taken into account, then they could be the things that sort of get put to the side a bit. I think it's the same when we've got in Key Stage 2 in the English national curriculum, when we've got citizenship, it's only an optional part of the curriculum. That's definitely going to be the first thing to go if teachers are strained in their timetables.
Yes, definitely. And I think what's so wonderful about the projects by the Little PM is that every project, you can arguably say, is linked to all the 7 areas of learning in early years. And I think that's what's so great. So these 2 areas that are not considered, obviously we consider them in our projects.
Yeah, and I think Anara, could get your perspective as well on these skills in life. Do you think that, such as the people, culture, and communities, is that something that is more relevant for life? When the children are much older than in the early years.
I believe that expressive art is a very powerful medium, not only for the children but for the adults as well. And a lot of children, they express themselves by the art or by the creative work that they're doing. And also it's much easier for them to express their emotion, their state, also their culture, their background through the art that they will be doing. I believe that it's such an unfortunate decision to downgrade the importance of the expressive art for the children. And understanding the world, I believe that with the globalization and everything happening in the world, and especially in the context of UAE and Dubai, where we have so many cultures, so many nationalities in one place, in one class, it's such a powerful topic to bring up into the classroom that would create a new friendship, create a better understanding on how different and at the same how similar we are coming from the different places and the different backgrounds.
Absolutely, and I suppose there's almost the opposite argument to be made in that if it be critically important if you have got schools in areas that where the school population is maybe a bit more homogenous, if the children aren't naturally exposed to people from different backgrounds and cultures, that's something that we should emphasize even more in the curriculum, because where else are they going to get it if we're not exposed them to that in school? This is, by the way, to do with the data from 2024 to 2025. So it is something that is still actively being used. The data for 25-26 is coming out. And as far as I could understand, the rationale, the process behind the new set of data will be the same as well. So what we can do, I suppose, the same as when we encounter policies that aren't quite really reflecting the reality in schools, as all these new documents to do with AI are doing, we can think about what we can do in our own institutions and in our own classrooms and our own practice as well. And just because these areas aren't taken into consideration for official data, it doesn't mean that we should by any means neglect them in the classroom. So it's really lovely to hear from you, Mollie, to hear how passionate you are about all aspects of early years, but particularly, you've talked to us today about understanding the world and expressive arts and design. And you said earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that that's something that the children are naturally drawn towards, the creative and the social elements of the learning.
Yes, I definitely think that. And I think as well, I think it's just one of the most important aspects, like Anara was saying. And I think if the children are naturally drawn to that, it definitely surprises you that then it's not considered within this document.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's strange. I could understand I could talk about this for a while, to be honest, this split. I could understand if they would to just focus on the literacy and mathematics, but to include something like emotional development, but not to include understanding the world, it's a very strange process. But anyway, it's something I thought was relevant for us to discuss. I just want to, I'll just flick back to this. So people can be reminded, people who've joined us a little late, about the fact that we have successfully adapted our Little PM approach to the early years, and we've got several units available, just as we have with Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. And hopefully children who are carrying out the early years Little PM units now will be taking part in the junior PM competitions in the future. So hopefully if we build these skills from a young age, we're going to be creating some really successful and positive learners.
Yeah, and also I would like to thank Mollie for helping us to develop the program for the early years. And now we are already starting creating an awareness of enrichment program that we have for the early years for entire academic year. And if anyone interested, they can go to our website and learn all those units that we have created, all those projects that we have created with collaboration with Mollie. That's available there. Thank you. Thanks, Mollie, for being part of our team and helping us to develop that program.
Oh, no problem. And it's been such a pleasure working with the Little PM as well. I've loved creating these projects. And thank you so much for having me today as well.
Not at all. It's been really valuable to have your expertise and your insight with this. We are going to be finishing a little earlier this week, but hopefully we'll be back with another guest next week. I think we'll be back either way. Hopefully we'll get our guest for next week. But yes, we are going to leave it there for today. And thank you very much, Mollie, again for sharing with us your perspective on what you've helped to create.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.